I did change my title many times, but it hasn't ended from the introduction until its appearance on the screen. But I would like to start my presentation today with a quote. It is the very discourse of the Gay International which produces homosexuals as well as gays and lesbians, where they do not exist. This quote draws to mind the widely publicized statement by Mahmoud Ahmadinejad in a speech he delivered at Columbia University, where he said, "In Iran, we don't have homosexuals like in your country." This quote was not, however, delivered by a head of state, but rather written by Columbia University professor Yusuf Nassab in his book Desiring Arabs, and his provocations helped frame my research. It is indeed widely established in scholarship that, until relatively recently, sexual identities and their surrounding discourses did not exist, and as of today are still absent from much of the world, even though same-sex sexual activity may be pervasive. In my talk today, I will contribute to this line of inquiry by challenging the idea of the passive production of sexual identities and exploring how people and organizations are rather actively contributing to conversations surrounding sexual identities in Amman, Jordan, where I conducted 6 weeks of ethnographic research. In particular, my research considers the growing currency that identity terms that are both internationally and regionally circulated carry among the upper middle classes in Amman, and the dialogue and debates that emerge when they are adopted to local contexts. To demonstrate these conversations, I will follow 2 online websites to show how 2 writers in Amman choose to navigate, challenge, and contribute to the gendered discourses that surround identity constructions. Amman itself is a booming commercial and political center of Jordan, a country that's currently experiencing a long period of political stability and economic growth. During my fieldwork, I interacted with members of Amman's upper middle classes who frequented coffee houses along the tourism-oriented Rainbow Street in spaces where conversations about sexuality take place openly. In Amman today, access to international media, especially internet, television, and most recently smartphone applications, have made sexual identity terms more widely available in a greater variety of contexts. 2 writers, born and raised in Amman, created online websites disseminating content engaging with various sexual identity constructions. An analysis of their online content offers insight into the way gender differences and gender binaries affect the currency that identity terms carry in a society where same-sex sexual activity, though legal, is a social taboo. The first source I'll examine today is My Kelley magazine, founded by editor-in-chief Kelley, who goes by the nickname Kelley. Kelley founded My Kelley magazine in 2008, and has since been published only online to protect the privacy of its readership who may face social discrimination if found consuming such content openly. Kelley came out as gay on the front cover of the magazine's premiere issue, and though the magazine has since accumulated a larger number of writers, both men and women, ages 21 to 45, his image is still iconic to the magazine, which carries his namesake. In June 2014, when I met with Kelley at Cafe Graffiti, where he and his friends often socialize during the month of Ramadan, he and a friend talked to me at length about how the magazine chooses to navigate sexual identities. The magazine is currently published entirely in English and primarily expresses these identities in terms of LGBTQ, as seen on the website's mission statement. A quick look at one of the website's most popular articles published in last year's January-February issue shows these terms in circulation. Kelley and his friend explained that before the magazine started, most of the material produced by the media in Amman was expressed using Arabic terms that carry a negative or condemning connotation. He explained that one such word is luti, which is used in references to Lut or Lot in the Quran, and while there are many interpretations in Islam of the story of Lot, at least in Amman today, is interpreted as Allah's revelation condemning all same-sex sexual activity. It's important to note that luti is typically a gendered term applied to men. However, there are some men in Amman who are reclaiming this term to refer to themselves ironically. Kelley explained, "Between us, we joke and use luti or whatever. Once you use an offensive word as a joke, you tend to lessen it, undermine the word. However, the men I spoke with did not choose to use luti as an identity term. While words like luti imply negative connotations, identity terms expressed in English can, in certain contexts, provide ways to discuss sexuality positively. Kelley explained how the conversations through his online magazine. He said, "I think before we started, the LGBTQ community wasn't discussed publicly. Never." Kelley himself envisions the magazine website as a space where people can have a common platform. This is a space for you to express yourself and be really raw. His main goal he aims to gain through the magazine is rights, he said, referring to LGBTQ community recognitions. Now, the second writer I spoke with is a self-identifying queer owner of a blog called Mind Pause. And it's the first blog to be written from the perspective of a queer woman in Amman. Her blog posts range from critiques of hierarchy discourses in Amman to stream of consciousness thoughts and personal challenges like breakups to poems she writes herself. Some of the poems are written in Arabic and the rest is expressed in English. MTP was one of two women I spoke with who identified as specifically queer, while the third issued identity terms altogether. On her blog, MTP writes about why she finds currency in the term queer in December of 2011. Queer. Yes, this is what I came to choose as a label the last quarter of this year. I felt capable of holding the many facets of my existence and identity, and that it can include a larger bubble that is not divided into being straight. How boring that system really is. Now, in contrast to the men I spoke with who found currency in what could be considered narrow or defining identity terms, like gay, the woman I spoke with disengaged from the very idea of a binary between straight and homosexual, which they saw reflected in terms such as lesbian. This, I would argue, helps explain why, unlike the self-identifying gay men I spoke with, like Kelley, who found currency in pursuing gay rights, these women were not interested in identity rights that ignore the binary constructions that we must confront daily. Kelley referenced one such binary where women are seen as passive and men as dominant, a belief he did not share. He said, "It's known that women are always passive in a relationship. It's like a definite, a truth." These women suggested that identity terms inform the implicit gendered power structures that they must confront in the men regardless of sexual orientation. For instance, one woman I spoke with explained, "It's hard for people in Amman to understand that women can be with women because they can't see sexuality in there to begin with." MTP strikes a similar chord in a writing on her blog. "I want to talk about the sexual revolution that needs to take back its freedom. You can't demand your rights fully and not command your right to practice your sexuality openly." Now, the issue of identity terms and their gender are of critical importance. Organizations like the International approach sexual identity from a much less locally specific context and are blind to the power hierarchies that forwarding LGBTQ rights may inform and may impact. Its online information does not consider that sexual identity terms, as relatively recent constructions, don't find currency in much of the Middle East, and may find different currencies across gender. However, a local organization called Al-Qaws, which is based in Palestine, does take seriously the gendering of both the adoption of terms and the experiences that they indicate. In an approach that considers local nuances, Al-Qaws aims to deconstruct gender power relations. Its mission statement reads, "Embracing oppressive social structures. We therefore view the adoption of feminism as a means to break existing power relations and challenge hegemony." Al-Qaws has spearheaded a regional movement to revive Arabic terms that describe same-sex sexual activity and apply them to distinct, locally resonant sexual identities. Along these lines, Al-Qaws publishes its online information in Arabic, which makes it accessible to those who aren't literate in English. Kelley's friend explains, "Now there's a lot of activists who've been rejecting to identify with the Western terms, like gay, queer, and they go back into the old Arabic terms, because these exist in the Arabic literature of 1,000 years. And back then it wasn't as rejected as now. It was more accepted." Kelley adds, "More accepted and praised, actually." Al-Qaws is one of a group of organizations that every summer puts together a 10-day camp that offers a safe space for people to discuss sexuality openly. The camp is called Munqutna Camp. Munqutna in Arabic means our region. The site's recruitment section for 2012, as MTP reposts it on our website, doesn't even mention identity terms such as LGBTQ as a requirement to attend. One of my participants this summer attended Munqutna Camp in Turkey in 2013. He described the camp as a place where we wore dresses and put on makeup. This wasn't for me, but I wanted to be as free as I can. There was lots of sex, a lot of freedom. It was like heaven. In closing, I've tried to explain today the various ways that identity terms may or may not find currency across different positionalities in Amman. While various NGOs and humanitarian organizations may aim to spread identity terms and their corresponding rights, they may erase key positions like gender discourses and sexually fluid histories. As Edward Said, one of the founders of post-colonial theory, writes, "No one today is purely one thing. This also means not trying to rule others, not trying to classify them or put them into hierarchies. Above all, not constantly reiterating how our culture or country is number one." Thank you very much.
You mentioned that your research focuses on like middle class and upper middle class folks. Did you, in the course of your research, did you encounter any narratives or experiences among queer, like working class or poor people?
No, and I think that has to do with the very nature of my research and looking for people who, it's hard to recruit people who talk about sexual identity when they don't find currency in sexual identity. So I think that was inherently limiting. And I think it's very important to note that I talked to a very limited class and a minority. So yes, that's important to note. And it was by no means a survey of the population.
Yeah, in an earlier version of this talk, you you quoted, I think it was well, somebody who said we don't have gays, right? Is that in an earlier version of your talk, or we don't have Ahmadinejad? Yeah, said that. Well, anyway, so riffing off like that point, and you kind of gestured to it as well. In your opening quote, the idea of like the discourse, like creating the identity category. Did they? Would you say that that I'm sorry, I'm trying to formulate like precisely the question that I want to ask.
Yeah.
But it's gone. I'm sorry. Identity, like sexuality, is something that you are versus something that you do.
Yes.
Right.
No, I think you touched on that in your talk today, talking about the construction of being a teenager as something that you experience, and then something that becomes an identity. And I think that and you mentioned football.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just like see a lot of resonances in your work.
Exactly the same idea. Looking at Michel Foucault and the history of sexuality and his construction 200 years ago, and I'm looking at identity terms in a certain class and looking at how they find currency, but also keeping in mind that they don't find currency in the majority.
Wondering if you could say a little bit more about the beginning part when you were talking about how the subject's like active role in like constructing like what that identity means to them, because there's a kind of narrative that we could pull out about sort of like an import of Western identity terms into other countries, and I really like the way that you